Now, why did you want to go and do that for, Calico? Well, you drew first.
Well, ladies and germs, it's been a little while since I had time to work on the old 292 here. But hopefully I can get a few things done in the next little while. So, first thing I'm going to start with, I'm just going to put freeze plugs in the block here. So I'm going to start with my favorite product in the whole world, Permatex Formagasket. If you haven't noticed by now, I use it for just about everything. Okay, I'm gonna clean up my mess, and then I'm gonna move on to the oil pump, and then when I pull the engine off the stand, I can get the rear freeze plugs and oil passage plugs. So here we got the old pump and the new one. Yep. Looks like it was kind of sagging. Maybe not. Start to twist and pull. Pick up tube out. New one in. Twist and push. Twist and push. Twist and push. You know. You gotta do it. Oh, come on. Get in there. Get started there. Okay. I think that's close. You know, a guy sure appreciates all the questions and comments you send my way. I do my best to get back to most of you, if not all of you. Kind of makes me feel like I should keep making videos, and I'm happy to do it as long as someone out there likes what I'm doing. If you have any comments or opinions on how I do them, if I'm showing way too much content, not nearly enough, you like what I'm doing as it is, send a comment my way and let me know. I notice a lot of guys like to be in front of the camera. I don't so much. But if that's what makes a better video, I might be willing to listen to it. I don't know. So I ordered some material from McMaster-Carr to help me install the timing cover, I hope. So before I can put that and the oil pan on, I need to build a little tool, and in the meantime I'm going to turn my attention to the head. And yeah, I could slap that on, just like I always have in the past, but I don't want to. And you can't make me. Yeah. So we'll just start jamming these in here. Did I get you? Alright, in all seriousness, this is our number 1. And like any other head, you work in a swirl pattern to the outside and you build on your torque as you go. These need to end up at 90 to 95 foot-pounds. So I'm going to start at 30, then 60, and then end up at the 90. Also, there are 2 head bolts on the corners. I'm not going to go to the final 90 because I am going to take those back out for my hook points when I'm ready to lift the engine back in. Once it's in, I'll re-torque them back down. Okay, there we go. These 2 I left at 60, and I will be sure to get those back up to 95 once I've got the engine in place. Whoa, what the heck? What's going on here? Now don't worry, I'm not jumping ahead on you. I've been busy making videos, doing all this work, but at this point I need to jump in and do an editorial. The video you're watching, I got a comment on by one nice gentleman, and he said, shouldn't there be sealant on those head bolts? And yes, absolutely there should be. And I need to get my brain and my head out of somewhere. I cannot apparently do videos and work on cars at the same time. I passed over that part. I got so excited about getting those head bolts in, I forgot to put the Permatex on the threads. So yes, seal the head bolts, then torque them down. And sir, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for drawing that to my attention. I'm a big enough boy with big boy pants on to admit I completely passed over that part of it. I forgot. And hey, you saved me a lot of work and a lot of heartache. A big headache. So thanks again, sir. We will do that. We'll move on. Now, all you guys that are determined not to be complete idiots your whole life, don't forget to put this oil passage plug here behind the cam gear. My case, however, I'm afraid it's Doctors have told me, however, that my case is inoperable, so here we go again. So a guy just really keeps trying to improve his game, you know, do things a little better. I've been looking on eBay for a long time for a timing cover installation tool, and guys just, you know, there must be preppers out there with specialty tools, because they just hang on to those things. And I bought a few things here and there, specialty tools, but they're pretty proud of them. So I went ahead and made my own. I'm going to put a little oil on the crank here and on the tool. Bought some plastic stock online and turned it down on my lathe. So that'll hold the timing cover where it needs to be, centered on the crankshaft, and now I can run these bolts in, and I know that seal is not going to get ruined by being offset. So here's the dealio on the oil pan. I've got a 4-piece gasket, and every time you get overlapping parts, you have a 100% chance of leaking. I have 4 parts that overlap, so I basically have a 400% chance of leaking. Makes sense, right? Now those odds would have been perfectly acceptable in 1966, but I kind of want it not to leak if I can prevent it. So we're going to use some silicone here. The first thing I'm going to silicone is the splits between the block and the cover, and then back here where the rear main gets sealed, and then we'll use the Permatex on the cork, and we'll seal in between both with silicone. Now it's interesting to note that they got this gasket, the blue stripes, wrong. Doesn't mean anything. Worked just fine. Well, if that leaks, the answer's simple. Put AMSOIL in it. No, in all seriousness, that really shouldn't be a problem. I'm going to clean up all the extra goop squirting out everywhere. I'm going to wipe down and paint the bare spots, and we can flip her back over. Top end or bottom end is done. And here's something to note. The earlier design of this front cover had 6 bolts total holding it to the pan. The new design of the gasket only uses 2, and that's what the Fel-Pro runs with. Part of me kind of wants to punch holes in that gasket and run all 6 bolts still, but we'll see. So I've got this teensy little problem. My pulley is all the way up against the flange on the shaft, but nevertheless it's still rubbing right there on that, whatever that line is that they cast into here. And really it's only, it probably wouldn't even rub if I took down this raised part on there, but I don't think I should have to do that. I would sooner notch out this line than modify an original part. So I think if I take about a 1/4 inch off right there with a grinder, that ought to be satisfactory. This is a Gates pump. I'm surprised that they did that, but oh well. Yeah, well, that gives it a good 1/8 of an inch. That ought to work just fine. I'll touch that paint up and continue on. Hey, come on now, wake up. You're gonna do that on a guy. I'm just gonna cut this off right here. Well, while you were out, I threw on alternator bracket, both motor mounts. The right side gets the spacers. As you can see, the left side is angled already. You'll figure it out. That stuff's simple. I think I'm to the point where the only other stuff I want to do before I put it in the engine bay is I'll put the lifters, push rods in, maybe even throw the rockers on, just so I don't have to lean way in there and do that. But everything else I want to keep safe by not having it on. Don't want to bend anything up, break anything, and yeah, let's get to work on that, and then we'll drop it in. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. it occurred to me that some of you guys might enjoy knowing a little bit more about crank and cam timing and adjusting the hydraulic lifters. And I kind of wanted to keep the momentum of this particular video rolling, getting it put back together, throwing it in the engine bay. So I'm going to skip ahead on this video and keep going with the rebuild, and then I've already got everything else recorded. So the next video after this that I will post on this project will be setting your crank, your cam, the theories behind all of that. If some of you get confused, hey, I know I do. And then what valves to adjust when and how to do all that. So I think that'll be quite a substantial video in itself, so we'll just do that. For now, I'm going to get these side covers torqued down. I'm going to hop in there and replace the throw-out bearing for the clutch, and then it'll be time to pull this off the engine stand, put the clutch assembly on the back and the plugs, and into the engine bay. And if you want to keep up and be notified when another video is posted, hit that little virtual red button. Okay, let's hop in here. Oh, yeah. We're going to pop this fork off its ball that it pivots on right here. My pry bar is way too big here. I don't know. I'll find out. There we go. Just an easy pop. And there's the old one. Spins okay, feels a little bit crunchy. The old one is perfectly round. The new one, for some reason, has some flat spots. So you just need to get the fork back on where you can. Okay, and then we're just going to pop it back on the pivot ball there. And there you can see how it works. Just pushes those fingers of the clutch pressure plate that way. Okay, I'm going to start with our 3 plugs, obviously. Now this one that goes behind the cam, you don't want to drive it in too far, so I'll drive it in about flush with the casting. You don't want it rubbing on the back of the camshaft there. Now my next little job is going to be to get the pilot bushing out of the end of the crank. And here at work, this spring we had occasion to need a puller that could pull a bearing race out of a blind hole in the bottom of a gearbox. And that is going to work real slick for pulling this bushing out. This is a OTC 4581. But those fingers just spread right out and grab that. So let's give this a shot. I have kind of a similar item, but much cheaper, I should say, at home for this job. I will try to keep this in the viewfinder. Swing an engine isn't the easiest thing to keep on camera. Okay. Works like a charm. So one of the challenges you face when trying to put a new bushing in the back of a crank is you can't get that large of a driver inside this machine part. If you watch my video on the 48 Chevy when I put the clutch on, I had to use a small enough driver to fit inside the hole, but that didn't give me much lip on the outside, and I ended up galling the outside of this. So a nice big flat driver would be great, but then you can't get it past this lip. So I just made a simple driver out of a bolt and a nut and a washer, taped up the threads real good so it won't gall up the inside of the bushing, and we'll give that a shot. Seems to be working fine. Alright, next is our hot off the press, hot off the brake lathe flywheel. Was the previous video on this build. So we get that started on that dowel. Let's see if I can wiggle it enough to get it on there. Get my dead blow. And let's see if that gives us some thread. Yeah, that'll work. Things are just getting exciting around here. Okay, we'll torque these to 60 foot-pounds, and I'll go in a crisscross pattern. Just a note, this is a Luke brand clutch kit I'm putting on here, and they do have its stamped flywheel side. Most likely any other brand would too. Just note that there is a difference. Well, everything is set to go back in the truck. Everything is really straightforward on these when you've got this 4-speed with a cross member under it. You know, your transmission's, it's just where it is. It's where it belongs. So we get the dowel pins lined up on the bell housing of the transmission. That's all we need to worry about there. Everything else will fall into place. So the only challenge that we're really going to have on this manual transmission is making sure the splines on the input shaft line up with the splines on the clutch plate. And more than likely that will be the case, and so at that rate we'll just jack up the rear axle and spin a tire over in gear and get this shaft to move one way or another until the engine is able to slide in there. So we'll fire up this crane and drop it in. Well, I did have a little bit of a fight on my hands. I really should have brought my engine load leveler so I could angle it backwards or forwards. What I ended up doing is keeping it hanging from my crane and using that to get the right level on the rear of the engine. Got that mostly lined up, and then I put a jack under the balancer and got the right angle on the engine, and then I was able to shove it backwards onto the input shaft. And then it came to about, ½ inch of the two flanges mating. I'm still not all the way. And at that point, the dowel pins were hitting. And so if you can get to that point, they fit so tight. Those dowel pins, they're machined to fit tight. And so I knew once my bolt holes were lined up, I could pull the dowel pins in. So I still have about 1/8 inch, 3/16 gap to tighten up. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And yeah, I would also recommend having a second person to turn the tire. You see I have it jacked up in gear so I could turn that transmission shaft and get those splines to line up. You can also use the crankshaft. I just find that more difficult. So let's get those tightened up, put motor mount bolts in, and then I can put the head bolts back in, torque those down to 95, and we are moving. Now I need a little bit of movement in here so I can get my bolt holes to line up. So I'm going to jack up the front again. See if that helps. Alright, before you let this thing get you madder than a legal voter, you want to loosen these 3 bolts on the bottom part of the mount, and they have nice adjustment slots in them. None of this is adjustable. I mean, the holes are pretty much set where they need to be, and when you put new mounts in, it's not always lined up. So on both sides I loosened this, then I could put my bolt in through the bottom, set the engine back down so it's in place, and I'll tighten everything down. Well, I just couldn't help myself. I had to see how this would look. I still have hardware and a gasket to put on there, but hey, I think it's looking pretty slick. What do you think? Got a lot more to do, a lot more piddly little things, but the big part of the job is done. Thank goodness. So, if you want to keep track of how this project is progressing, just hit subscribe. I've got the carburetor, Rochester Model B carburetor, soaking in gas at home as we speak. I'll get a video up soon of rebuilding that. Like I said, adjusting the valve lash on here. That video will be up after this one. And just a whole lot more. We will see you later.
And I come out on top, so how about giving me that silver buckle?
What do you think I'm about to do, little
Oh,
baby?
you're gonna give me a belt.
Yep.
Yeah, oh, now, Sheriff.
You
Now,
Eric Tidewater.
dignified. Sheriff. Sheriff.